So here's the book I wrote, UFOs Over Colorado. I dug real deep into various UFO organizations, contacted a bunch of UFO researchers, got some original cases of my own, and let's just start digging into what I think are the top 20 Colorado cases. And this case I want to include is the Greeny Mountain UFO incident. This is not very well known. I got this from researcher Christopher O'Brien, who is certainly one of Colorado's most prominent UFO researchers. And this occurred on January 12th, 1994. And I think it's probably the best verified possible or alleged UFO crash in Colorado. This occurred on Greeny Mountain, which is in Colorado, in Rio Grande County. It occurred in around late December 1993, early January 1993. There had been a wave of sightings involving orbs and mysterious sonic booms. And then on January 12th, 1994, a NORAD official called the Rio Grande County Sheriff's Office to report an explosion and a heat source, a signature that they had detected by satellite on the north face of Greeny Mountain. And they told Undersheriff Brian Norton that this heat source wouldn't have registered for anything less than a 3-acre fire. So they asked him to investigate. As Sheriff Brian Norton says, a guy from NORAD told us to expend all efforts to find out what it was. So he drove up there and couldn't find anything. But it turns out there were a lot of sightings going on at this time. Around this time, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Lloyd, he's a retired fighter pilot, a great witness, was driving on State Highway 67, which is about 40 miles east of the San Luis Valley, and he saw a group of 6 or 7 unidentified objects racing overhead, heading towards the direction of Greeny Mountain. And there were other witnesses. Brian Norton started calling various Air Force bases and airports and could not find any confirmation of these objects. He searched the area himself for several hours, found no evidence of any fire, and he phoned NORAD back to tell them. And he was routed to, strangely, a supervisor from FEMA, who said in no uncertain terms to just forget about the incident. And when Sheriff Norton asked about this officer became belligerent and hung up on him. So over the next few days, there was a number of sightings and a number of green balls of light were being observed, striking the mountain. And also there was a number of government aircraft, B-52 bombers flying over the site. There was a bunch of black helicopters appearing. People saw more weird blue flares in the area. A lot of sheriffs and deputies were keeping watch, and they observed UFOs themselves. Deputy Mike James, he saw 3 helicopters flying over only 300 feet apart, scouring the area, apparently looking for something. So this was a pretty major event. There were more weird explosions, more black helicopters. Sheriff Brian Norton continued to investigate it because it was clear something was going on. He called NORAD again and asked them, what are all these black helicopters we're seeing up here? And NORAD's response was, quote, "That's confidential information." So Sheriff Brian Norton actually spoke to reporters, and he said, and I quote, "It's strange. I really can't make heads or tails of this." He suspects that something crashed on Greeny Mountain. He thought perhaps it was a cruise missile, but he contacted White Sands, and a spokesman, Jim Eccles, said that they had not lost any cruise missiles and told him, quote, "We know nothing about the source of this phenomenon up in Colorado." But as Sheriff Norton says, something was there. This valley is not known for chopters. We don't have any in the valley. And I'd like to know where these are coming from and what they are doing here. As Norton says, at first we were just thinking it was a downed plane or something. Then the longer it went, the story kept changing. We tried to come up with our own conclusions in this matter, but we didn't have any. We just kind of stood around scratching our heads and looked at the sky. So by the end of January, the sightings stopped, and he called NORAD again, and nobody had any answers. They just gave him the runaround. As Sheriff Norton says, and I quote, "Somebody knows what happened. I think they located it, and now it's over with." But this wasn't over yet. There was more sightings for a few months, actually. Christopher O'Brien investigated this case, and he learned that there were some very disturbing aspects to it. He was able to talk with someone who had a source, quote, close to the NORAD event, and found that in the 2 weeks following this original incident, a newly promoted captain at the base was found in her garage dead of carbon monoxide poisoning. Allegedly, she had committed suicide, but it's certainly a suspicious death because he spoke with another NORAD employee who told him that the captain's death was in fact related to the NORAD event and that 2 other people involved in the case also died under suspicious similar circumstances. And Christopher O'Brien writes, "What could be so secret as to warrant death?" Well, as we have seen with UFO crash retrieval cases, the government or the secret government will sometimes go to extreme lengths to cover it up. Certainly the Roswell craft, people were threatened with death, and there were a few suspicious deaths involved in that case and in other cases. So that is the Greeny Mountain incident. And although there is no direct evidence saying that this was a UFO crash, there's certainly quite a bit of circumstantial evidence pointing towards something very unusual happening. And that's why I gave it case number 5.